The cities of Chattanooga and Atlanta might only be 2 hours apart, but when it comes to lifestyle, they couldn't be more different. Atlanta is a major metro hub. It's fast-paced, full of opportunity, and packed with things to do. But with that comes traffic jams, longer commutes, and higher costs of living. Chattanooga, on the other hand, is smaller and more laid back. It's surrounded by mountains, hiking trails, and the river that runs right through the city. Life here moves at a slower pace, and your dollar stretches much further. If you're trying to decide between the big city hustle of Atlanta and the more nature-forward, outdoor enthusiast city of Chattanooga, then this video will help you figure out which one will be a better fit for you. Today, I'm breaking down everything you need to know, from traffic and cost of living to culture, commute times, and overall quality of life, so you can make the best decision for your next chapter. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, my name is Evan Barron, and on this channel we go over all things Chattanooga, what it's like to live, eat, sleep, play, and work. And I am a licensed realtor here in Tennessee and in Georgia. And as much as I love making these videos, I love more to help you guys with your real estate needs. So if you are looking to move to the area, feel free to contact me in any of the ways down below, and I will be absolutely happy to take care of your relocation needs. All right, so first of all, let's take a big picture overview of these two cities. We're going to talk about population, city size, and the overall vibe of each city. So Atlanta, first of all, is a major metropolitan hub with a population of around 6 million people. It's a very fast-paced city, and it's just 2 hours south of Chattanooga. Chattanooga is more of a mid-sized city with a population of right around 560,000 people in the metro area. This is going to be less of a concrete jungle and more outdoor focused. And we're going to talk about the geography of each city as well and how the geography actually affects the overall culture. Chattanooga sits at the base of the Cumberland Plateau right above the Georgia line, and the city of Chattanooga has the Tennessee River running straight through it. So not only do you have a water feature running through the beautiful city, you have the Cumberland Plateau, Lookout Mountain, Signal Mountain, just west of the city. And so I tell people, anytime you are actually in the city, it's not uncommon to see beautiful views of Lookout Mountain. If you live in the city center, you're only about a 5 to 10 minute drive to your nearest hike. You're also within 2.5 hours of Nashville, and it's about an 1.5 hour drive to Knoxville. Now, if we just look at the footprint of both cities, both metro areas on a map and overlay them, you can really see how much more expansive Atlanta is compared to Chattanooga. Chattanooga only has a handful of main roadways, whereas Atlanta's road network looks like an expansive web of nerves and neurons. It's sprawling, it's interconnected, and it's constantly buzzing with activity. Many people are leaving Atlanta for Chattanooga because they want to escape the traffic, they want a little bit lower cost of living, and they want to gain space without sacrificing the access to amenities. So you have to ask the question, do you want a big city experience with shopping, job opportunities, and that big city feel? Or do you want a mid-sized city that still has modern amenities but has a small town feel? So now let's talk about cost of living, because in this world that seems to be getting more expensive every single day, it's becoming more and more important to live in a place where you have to keep more money without sacrificing too much of your lifestyle. I want to share this chart with you. What this is showing is it's showing different costs associated with energy, food, healthcare, housing, and transportation, not only comparing the two cities, Atlanta versus Chattanooga, but also to the national average. So compared to the national average in Atlanta, energy is about 1% or 2% more affordable. When it comes to food, you're going to be spending actually a little bit more money in Atlanta than the national average. When it comes to healthcare, Atlanta is 10% more affordable than the national average. Housing is about 3 to 4% more expensive than the national average. Now let's look at Chattanooga, which all looks a little bit different. Chattanooga is more affordable in every single category, not only comparing it to Atlanta, but also the national average. And so when it comes to energy, you're looking at about an 18% more affordable range than the national average. Food, you're right around 24% more affordable. When it comes to healthcare, you're even more affordable, right around 27, 28%. When it comes to housing, guys, housing is one of the most expensive things that you spend your money on, right? And in Chattanooga, you're definitely way less than the national average and even more affordable when comparing to Atlanta. And when it comes to transportation, you're gonna be spending about 15% less when comparing it to the national average. So the median home price in Chattanooga right now is right around the $345,000 range. And if you decide to rent a 2-bedroom apartment or single family home, you're gonna be spending around the $1,500 mark. In Atlanta, the median home price is right around $385,000, and the median rent is going to be around the $1,600 to $1,700 mark. Now, as you guys know, this really depends on which area you decide to focus on and move to. For example, if you move to a place like Lookout Mountain, Tennessee, it's gonna look way different than if you move to a place like Eastridge. You know, the median home price in a place like Lookout Mountain is like 1.2 million. And a place like Eastridge is right around the lower 300 range. So there's a lot of factors in play when it comes to the median home price. In Chattanooga, I would expect to pay at least $350,000 depending on where exactly you're moving to. In fact, I say this a lot in my videos at this point. Places like Chattanooga or Atlanta or other cities in the Southeast have experienced so much demand in the last several years, and home prices have been driven up at a pretty extreme rate. And so depending on where exactly you're coming from, if you're coming from a place like Florida, those home prices may actually be more in line with what it looks like in Florida. It may be very similar to what you're looking at. Now, we're gonna go over this in a second, because not only do home prices factor into your monthly or your yearly budget, we're gonna talk about taxes, insurance, and that type of thing as well. So let's dive into it. When it comes to a state income tax, Tennessee doesn't have one. It's one of the great benefits of moving to Chattanooga and Tennessee in general. Whereas in Georgia, you do have around a 5.5% state income tax, and they are looking to lower it. There's talks of it lowering to 4.99% in the future. When it comes to property taxes, Tennessee also tends to be on the lower end as well. You can expect to pay between effectively 0.5% and 0.8%, again, depending on where exactly you're moving to in Chattanooga. In Atlanta, you can expect to pay above 1% effectively of your home value. So what does that actually come out to in reality? Well, if you're spending around $500,000 on a home in Chattanooga, expect to pay, depending on where you live, around $2,500 to $3,500 a year in property taxes. If you purchase that same home in Atlanta, you can expect to pay $6,000 to $8,000 per year on your property taxes. Now, when we talk about sales tax, it does flip a little bit. Tennessee has a statewide sales tax of 7%, and then depending on which county you decide to move to, Chattanooga is in Hamilton County. Hamilton County has an additional 2.25% sales tax, so you're effectively paying in total 9.25% in sales tax. Now in Georgia, you do have a statewide flat tax rate at 4%, and Atlanta has both a county and a city sales tax as well, totaling at 8.9%. So actually, when you're comparing both cities with sales tax, you're paying 8.9% in Atlanta and 9.25% in Chattanooga. Not a big difference. The biggest differences are going to be the income tax, the property taxes, and then your vehicle registration and taxes surrounding sales of vehicles. So check this out. In Georgia, when you buy a car, there's a one-time tax called the title ad valorem tax, or TAVT. It's 7% of the car's value if you're buying it in Georgia. If you're moving to Georgia and bringing a car with you, that rate is reduced to 3%. And this is a one-time fee, but it matters because it's not like car prices are very cheap nowadays as well. Let's whip out the calculator and see realistically what this comes out to. Guys, again, this is not like a sales tax. This is just to register your vehicle. And it is a one-time fee, but it does matter. So if you're buying a $50,000 new or used car in Georgia, you're paying an additional 7% just to title the dang thing. You're paying $3,500 to drive it. Again, one-time fee, but it matters because Tennessee doesn't have this. Now, on top of that, there's an $18 title fee and then a $20 annual fee for renewal to keep your plates current. So it's a big tax up front and then a small annual fee moving forward. In Tennessee, there's no big upfront tax like the TAVT tax in Georgia. You just pay a flat yearly fee to register your vehicle. It's usually between $60 and $90 a year, depending on which county you're in. Now, when it comes to your everyday costs like gas prices, utilities, groceries, daycare costs, things of that nature, it's all gonna be relatively similar. Now, when it comes to commute times and traffic, Atlanta is infamous for its congestion. The main interstates, I-75, I-85, and I-285, or the perimeter loop, are some of the most heavily traveled roads in the entire Southeast. Rush hour often feels like a standstill, and it's not limited to just peak times. Midday and weekends can be just as bad as your typical rush hour, especially in popular spots like Buckhead, Midtown, and downtown. You're probably gonna be living on the outskirts, and if you work in downtown, you have to, commute to and from downtown. And so something that looks like a 20-minute drive on the map can often turn into a 1 to 2 hour commute. If you live in the outskirts suburbs like Alpharetta, Marietta, or Peachtree City, your 15 to 20 mile commute can easily become an hour to an hour and a half to even 2 hours at times. I recently helped out a client named Demetra. She moved from Atlanta to Chattanooga. And before making this video, I wanted a real world perspective on someone who actually lived in Atlanta. I wanted to see, hey, how does traffic actually compare? Because if you look at the comments in my videos, people complain about the traffic all the time in Chattanooga, and it does certainly exist in certain areas. I'm gonna go over that in a second. But coming from a local who actually lived in Atlanta, moved here to Chattanooga, has lived here for a while, she describes the traffic difference as an absolute joke. It doesn't compare. In fact, I used to live in a city like Miami. Traffic is very similar to Atlanta, and she's right. It is an absolute joke comparing the two cities and the traffic. Again, if we just go earlier on in this video and we look at the mere footprint of each city, in Chattanooga, even if you're living in a suburb on the outskirts, you're still not traveling too far of a distance. And so even if there is traffic, you're not gonna be sitting in it for very long until your exit comes around. Whereas in Atlanta, you can easily be traveling 15 to 20 miles in standstill traffic. Chattanooga, where you will see the most traffic, is in the section where I-75 meets I-24, that split right there, and then kind of a long I-24 to downtown Chattanooga. Sometimes you will see it on the Ooltewah side as well, because between Ooltewah and Cleveland, there is a big ridge that kind of separates the two cities. There's a lot of truckers that go on that road, and sometimes that area can get a little bit backed up as well. And then during the holidays, if you go to a place like Hamilton Place, which is the main mall, the main shopping mall in the Chattanooga area, that place gets absolutely packed. It's sometimes hard to find parking. It's not like that on a daily basis, though. It's really just during those peak holiday seasons. But then if you're living in a place like Hickson or Soddy Daisy and you use US 27, the scenic highway, as your commute to downtown Chattanooga, you're never running into traffic because there's so little people who live that north of the river. So there's just not a lot of people commuting over there. Most of the traffic revolves around people traveling east to west and west to east. I think the longest it's ever taken me to travel from one side of the city, say Ooltewah, to downtown Chattanooga was about 45 minutes, and that was in heavy traffic. Now, air travel is another point that I'll talk about later in the video, but Chattanooga does have a small metro airport, but if you're traveling internationally, then you're gonna wanna go to the Atlanta International Airport. And it's funny though, because sometimes we just wanna avoid Atlanta altogether, whether you're traveling down south to Florida, you're making that drive south of Atlanta, or going back up north to Chattanooga, or you're traveling to the airport, you really have to factor in the Atlanta traffic because it is absolutely terrible and insane, and you're gonna wanna avoid it at all costs. Now, at the end of the day, the most important part is your convenience in daily life. Whether you're running errands, taking kids to sports, or heading to dinner, going from point A to point B in Chattanooga is really convenient compared to a place like Atlanta. You don't really need to plan your day around traffic, parking, or long commute times. And then parking downtown is actually pretty easy and inexpensive as long as there's not like a crazy music festival going on or the Chattanooga Car Festival or something like that. On a normal day, going to and from downtown is very easy, and parking and walking within the city is very easy as well in Chattanooga. Now, one of the most important things to me anyways, when it comes to drive times and traffic, as a realtor, I drive all the time. And I actually used to live in Miami where the traffic and everything looked much different than it does here in Chattanooga, more similar to Atlanta. It was stressful getting into the car and driving most of the time, all right? In order to get to a place that was 5 miles away, it would take 30 minutes to an hour. It was absolutely insane. Moving here to Chattanooga, it's just not as stressful. You're not staring at taillights the entire time. You can look at kind of the beauty that's all around you, the mountains, and there's not a ton of people on the road. If you are sitting in traffic, yeah, it can get annoying. Let's be real. Chattanooga has traffic and it can be annoying at times, but again, you're not sitting in it for very long. And if you're living in a place like Soddy Daisy, that's north of downtown and north of the river, I use my client Alex as an example because he moved from Orlando, which again is more similar to Atlanta, where he was used to the crazy traffic and that type of thing. Although it takes a 20 to 25 minute drive to go from Soddy Daisy to downtown via US 127, it's not a stressful drive because there's no traffic on US 27. It's a scenic highway where you got lake views and you have mountain views, and it's beautiful and calming. Right? So when you move from a place like a major city hub like Atlanta or Miami or Phoenix or New York, wherever you're coming from, just understand the driving is just a little bit less stressful. Also, people are not as much in a rush. Atlanta has a very hustle culture. People want to get to work. People want to get back home from work. It's just a more stressful environment. I remember again living in Miami, if you did not go immediately once that traffic light turned green, you were getting honked at by multiple people behind you. In Chattanooga, it's just more laid back. If you're on your phone scrolling and you're at a red light and it turns green, you gotta wait at least 3 to 4 to 5 seconds before someone decides to honk at you. People are very polite here. It's more likely that people will just start driving around you than they will honk. It's actually pretty funny, but that's something that you can expect and it's part of the culture. Now, when it comes to the culture and lifestyle and things to do, that's when the two cities really start to differentiate. Atlanta has big sports teams. You have the Braves, the Hawks, the Falcons. So you have a sports culture at all times during the year. You also have a huge arts and entertainment scene. You have festivals, concerts, all types of entertainment happening all around you at every time of year. There's also a very diverse nightlife and restaurant scene. There's tons of options. And in Chattanooga, it's a little bit more laid back. There's no major sports team. There is a minor league baseball team. You have a professional soccer team out here, but no giant stadiums. Where Chattanooga shines is in the outdoors. It is the outdoor capital of the Southeast. Your access to hiking, biking, climbing, the lake life, rivers, creeks, waterfalls, hang gliding, all of that stuff is so accessible in this city. There's a reason why this place is called the Boulder, Colorado of the South and the Scenic City. It's also the first national park city in the United States. In fact, some of the local attractions that Chattanooga is most known for include Rock City, Ruby Falls. You got the Tennessee River Walk, the pedestrian bridge, all kind of surrounding nature. We've got family-friendly festivals throughout the year, farmers markets. We also do have a pretty big arts and entertainment scene. There are music festivals that happen throughout the year as well. And you still have great restaurant and breweries around the city as well. It's just not as diverse as Atlanta because Atlanta is just so much bigger. Atlanta has more amenities across the board. And that does play a role when it comes to the job market as well. Atlanta is just gonna have more options. The city of Atlanta is a corporate hub. You've got Coca-Cola, Delta, Home Depot, UPS, and so much more in Atlanta. There are more job opportunities, especially in a corporate role. In Chattanooga, it's a growing tech and logistics hub. You have an Amazon fulfillment center, you've got a Volkswagen plant, you have Blue Cross Blue Shield, you have the healthcare industry is huge here as well. And there's a lot of tech startups planting their roots here in Chattanooga. Chattanooga is a huge plus for not only remote workers, but honestly, people who do work in Atlanta as well, but don't have to be in the office at all times every single day. One of my clients who moved to Ottawa, his name's Octavian, he actually works in Atlanta and he travels there multiple times a month. It's certainly not every single day because that would just be too much of a hassle. But it's a couple times a week, a few times a month, and it's totally worth it for him to live in a slower paced, smaller city like Chattanooga and commute to Atlanta a few times a month. The benefit for him is that he doesn't have to deal with all that comes with living in a big city, but he does get the big city wages, and he lives in a town where the cost of living is actually much lower as well. So he's benefiting basically all around by deciding to live in Chattanooga and work in Atlanta. Now, the same goes for the education and school system as well. In Atlanta, you have a wide range of options. You have some of the best schools in the state, but of course it's going to vary depending on which district you're in. The private school tuition in Atlanta seems to be a little bit higher in general than in Chattanooga as well, although Chattanooga does offer some pretty high-end private school opportunities. In Chattanooga, it's very similar where the public schools vary by area. You've got places like Hickson, Signal Mountain, and East Brainerd that are very desirable for families because of the school district. But in general, it's really just gonna vary depending on which area you decide to move to and what exactly you're looking for. I definitely encourage you to go to places like greatschools.com, niche.com to look at the different school district and what each area offers. Now, in general, Chattanooga is actually going to be a very private school and magnet school driven city. You have schools like STEM School of Chattanooga, you've got Macaulay, Baylor, Silverdale Baptist, you have Collegedale Academy. You have many, many different magnet schools and private schools to choose from. And then this homeschooling community out here is pretty good as well. It's very supportive. Now, when it comes to travel in proximity to other major cities, Atlanta is going to have the leg up with its international airport. If you travel often and you travel across the country or internationally very often, then Atlanta is going to be a hub for direct flights. It's one of the busiest airports in the world and great for frequent travelers. Chattanooga has its regional airport with direct flights to major hubs like Atlanta or Charlotte or Dallas, and it definitely is expanding a lot. But if you're looking for more direct flights, then Atlanta is going to be the place to fly to, or fly from rather. The cool part about living in Chattanooga is you're only 2 hours away from Atlanta, right? And so if you don't want to fly out of Chattanooga and take a connecting flight from Atlanta to wherever else you're going to, you can easily just drive 2 hours and fly direct from there. At least once a year, my wife and I like to travel to Europe. And honestly, in my experience, it's actually a much better and laid back experience if you fly out of Chattanooga and take the connecting flight out of Atlanta or Charlotte or wherever it is, than to drive down to Atlanta and deal with the traffic and the hustle and bustle that comes with traveling down to Atlanta. Just easier flying out of Chattanooga in general. Now, when it comes to the weather and climate, if you're in the Southeast, there's not going to be too much of a difference. But because Chattanooga is wedged right in between two major mountain ranges, the Cumberland Plateau and the Appalachian Mountains, it's going to have a slightly cooler climate, but you're gonna notice that more in the winter than you are in the summer. The summers in both cities are going to be very hot and humid. The difference is in Chattanooga, you kind of have a little bit of an escape if you go to Signal Mountain or Lookout Mountain. In fact, the older homes in Lookout and Signal were actually summer cottages that people decided to build to escape the valley heat. So if you do decide to buy a home on Lookout or Signal, you can expect it to be a good 5 to 10 degrees cooler than in the valley. This is also going to come into play during the winter time. If it snows, expect it to stick a little bit longer in the mountains than in the valley. In Atlanta, there's not a ton of that. It did snow once in Atlanta, but it snowed slightly more in Chattanooga this past winter. But in general, the climate is going to be very similar. Key differences in Chattanooga, you have more of an escape. You have rivers, you've got creeks, you've got waterfalls, you've got lakes, you have different escapes and different routes to cool off, and it's all way more accessible than if you live in a big, expansive city like Atlanta. Now, if you look at the differences in architectural style and the type of buildings that were erected in both cities, Atlanta is going to feel more like a concrete jungle. I don't know what it is. I don't know if it's the heat that reflects off the concrete or what, but every time I go to Atlanta or if I fly out of the airport, it just seems hotter, especially during those summer months. I just sweat more. It's hot, it's humid. I think it has something to do with all of the concrete that's around you. Now, comparing that to Chattanooga, Chattanooga doesn't have a ton of these big skyscrapers. In fact, a lot of the buildings, a lot of the biggest buildings actually sit pretty low. Now, anywhere you're at in the city itself, you can basically see views of Lookout Mountain and maybe even Signal Mountain as well, and the river. And I think a lot of that has to do with the terrain, right? You're right at the plateau, meaning there's gonna be a lot of undulation in the geography. Whereas in a lot of these bigger cities, right? It seems like they just dropped a bomb, they bulldozed everything and then erected these giant skyscrapers. That's not the case in Chattanooga. The buildings sit quite low. There's almost like this European flair, and they kept a lot of the nature within the city itself. So it's not uncommon to see mature trees, mature landscaping within the city itself. You'll also notice a lot of rock formations because you're right at the gate, essentially, of the Cumberland Plateau, right at the base of Lookout Mountain. You'll see a lot of rock formations, a lot of greenery, a lot of tree coverage, and I think all of that contributes to the cooler climate. I noticed this, and I really do feel there's a stark difference if you're moving from a place like Florida or even Atlanta itself, where it is hot and humid. It's actually a very similar climate. For whatever reason, I think it's everything. The rock formations, tree coverage, mature trees, all the foliage, and not as much concrete. It feels a little bit cooler in Chattanooga. And of course, because we are slightly more north and we have mountains all around us, the fall months are going to be absolutely spectacular in Chattanooga as well. The autumn foliage, not only in the valley, but if you go up to the Cumberland Mountains or if you go east towards the Appalachian Mountains, it is absolutely gorgeous. And I would say the same is true for Atlanta. The colors do change in Atlanta as well. They're not going to be as bright. They're going to be slightly more dull, but Atlanta is still within an hour and a half of a place like Blue Ridge where you can find that mountain escape. Now, who is each city best for? Now, if you are a young professional seeking career growth, seeking more money and things like that, then Atlanta is going to be the better option, period. Atlanta is going to be a place where people need close access to corporate offices. And you know what? A lot of people love the lifestyle of a bustling city life. There's nothing wrong with that. Atlanta is just going to be way more amenity rich as well. There's going to be more access to shopping, healthcare, schools, basically everything when it comes to your modern amenities because it is a much bigger city. Now, Chattanooga is going to be best for those individuals and families who want a slower pace of life. They don't want to deal with the big city hustle and bustle. It's going to be great for your families, your kids, your individuals, your retirees, everyone who loves an outdoor lifestyle. A place like Chattanooga is so much more nature forward where you have access, super close access to your hiking, creeks, waterfalls, blue holes, boating, some of the best mountain biking in the Southeast, and all that the mountains and the outdoors have to offer. Chattanooga is also going to be a great place to move to if you're a remote worker and you want to maintain your current pay, but you want to move to a place that's a little bit more affordable where upgrading your lifestyle is not going to absolutely drain your wallet. And the great part about both of these cities is that they are only 2 hours apart. So if you're living in Atlanta, getting tired of it, come to Chattanooga for a weekend. And if you're living in Chattanooga and want some sort of nightlife or you want to go to a Braves game or something like that, go to Atlanta for the weekend. They're not too far apart. And guys, just a reminder, I am a licensed realtor here in Tennessee and in North Georgia. So as much as I love making these videos, I love more to help you guys with your real estate needs. So feel free to contact me in any of the ways down below. I'd love to hop on a 30-minute Zoom call to go over any of your specific needs, which area I think might best fit your lifestyle and budget, and just to help you with that relocation process. If you like this video, hit that like button, comment down below, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.